You're listening to Talking to Teens, where we speak with leading experts from a variety of disciplines about the art and science of parenting teenagers. I'm your host, Andy Earle, creator of the Teenage Personality Quiz. Head to talkingtoteens.com for a free PDF explaining how your teenager thinks. We are here today with Linda McGurk. She is the author of There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather. She is a Swedish-American journalist and blogger, and she lives with her family in Sweden now, but she's also lived in Indiana and Montana in the U.S. So she got really interested in the cultural differences between parenting in America and parenting in Sweden and what those can tell us about how we can all parent better. Linda is an avid outdoorsman. She loves getting her family outside, and she writes about all of that natural parenting and outdoor play, and her writing has appeared all over the place, from Outdoor Families Magazine, Childhood 101, Green Child Magazine, and many more. And her blog is called Rain or Shine Mama. Really interested to bring her on the show today to talk about how you can get teenagers outside and what you can do with teenagers who are on social media and don't want to go outside. So all that and more is coming up on the show today. The book is called There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, a Scandinavian mom's secrets for raising healthy, resilient, and confident kids. And there's some stuff in here that's like so fascinating. I always think like cultural differences are really, really interesting to me because it's like kind of becomes invisible. You know, you live in a certain culture and you just sort of like accept that this is the way things are, you know, and this is the way parenting is, and this is like the way that things just go. And so it was just like so fascinating for me to see some of the things in your book that are different in different countries, you know, and you talk about other countries as well, not just, you know, the U.S. and Sweden, but so. Can you just talk a little bit first about kind of the story of what inspired this book and kind of how it all came about?
Yeah. You're right. The whole idea of different cultures treating the whole parenting thing differently is really fascinating. I think we've seen books about Chinese parenting and French parenting, and then I thought it was about time somebody wrote a book about Scandinavian parenting. My book mostly talks about the role of nature connection in childhood, and it came about because I was born and raised in Sweden, but I moved over to the U.S. when I was in my 20s, and I lived in Montana for a couple of years, and the outdoors was a big part of my life growing up in Sweden. And I was able to sort of pick that up in Montana as well, but then we moved to Indiana, and we had our first daughter 11 years ago, and that's when I really started to notice some big differences not just between the cultures, but also parenting cultures specifically. So, for example, in Sweden, it's a very common custom to let your kids nap outside, even like very young babies, and even in the winter, even in freezing temperatures, you know. And in Indiana, people were even like afraid to take their babies outside at all in the wintertime. So, needless to say, there were some culture clashes with, you know, other parents being very sort of questioning of what like is it okay to take my baby outside? And I was thinking, you know, I'll wait till the spring comes to go for a walk, you know. And this was so foreign to me. I had just assumed that taking your kids outside in the winter or any time was sort of common practice anywhere. So, you know, it started already when they were babies. So that's sort of where I got the idea for a book. I thought I wanted to share my story of growing up in Sweden because I know how healthy it is for kids to be outside and to be in nature.
So one thing that I thought was really, really fascinating, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but is the concept of friluftsliv.
Yeah.
How do you say that?
Friluftsliv.
Friluftsliv.
Friluftsliv. Yeah.
Okay, so what the heck
Yes.
is that, and how is that different from the way we do things in America?
Good question. So, friluftsliv is it's a cultural tradition of sorts that's sort of passed down from generation to generation in Sweden. The word itself sort of originated in the 1800s. It literally means free air life, and it came about as a reaction against industrialization, actually. So it started among the cultural elites who they sought out nature to sort of get away from the cities. I mean, this is already back in the 1800s. So they wanted away from the pollution and the noise and the people and the traffic and horse and buggy, whatever it was back then. So they just went out into the countryside. And after the Second World War, then the government started to promote it because they realized this was really good public health measure because people felt good when they were outside. And also people started to have bigger disposable incomes and they had more time off. So that's when it really started to become a movement with more people being able to go to the countryside and, away from the cities. And today, people still leave the cities for the same reasons, to get away from traffic and noise and all that. But we also need to get away from technology today. It's getting harder and harder to find places where you can actually shut off your cell phone and just sort of be in the present moment. So friluftsliv, we're finding that today it's more popular than ever, actually. And I think that's got to do with the fact that we're always online, plugged in on our devices. And so friluftsliv is still very popular. And it's different from outdoor recreation a little bit. That would be the sort of similar term that you would use in the U.S., the difference being that friluftsliv is very much about just being in nature. It's a sort of I call it slow nature, just like we have slow food and things like that, because it's just about experiencing nature without any pressure to achieve or compete. It's just you go outside without a specific agenda and it's sort of the space where humans and nature meet and where the two intersect. So it's typically non-motorized. So kayaking, for example, would be considered friluftsliv, but going out on a motorboat is not. Whereas that could still be outdoor recreation, like water skiing, for example. That could be outdoor recreation, but it's not friluftsliv because it's an action sport. It's more about the sport, personal thrill. So it's not about that meeting with nature. And it's typically non-competitive, so a walk, just a slow walk in nature is friluftsliv, but running a 5K or a 10K, for example, not quite, because you're competing, so it's about the race.
It brings your focus onto the competition and
yes.
winning. Yeah, and you're beating your time or whatever it is.
Yes, so it's not about personal thrills or achievements, it's just about connecting with nature, sort of using all your senses and sort of developing this deep sensation of connectedness with nature and a love for nature, and also learning survival skills. Even though it's not about having like a curriculum, it's not like a classroom, but it is about having this desire to learn with nature as a teacher, so more informal, and you don't have to be an expert. It's just having the willingness to learn. It's not a set of activities, it's more just like a culturally learned rhythm that revolves around being outside and experiencing this oneness with nature.
A lot of parents have told me that they thought about hiring a therapist or a counselor for their teenager, but they weren't sure where to go to find someone that they trust. I recommend checking out teencounseling.com. They'll match your teenager with a counselor right where they spend the most time, on their smartphone. It's more affordable than traditional counseling, and financial aid is available. Talking to Teens listeners get 10% off your first month at teencounseling.com/talkingtoteens. So I've been running a little experiment this week, having a scoop of Wild Foods Cocoa Tropic in my coffee every morning, and I gotta say, I am feeling amazing. My mental clarity and focus is so sharp. I'm waking up at 5:30 every morning without an alarm clock, just ready to go, feeling great. So I gotta say, the experiment's been a huge success. If you haven't tried Wild Foods Cocoa Tropic Mushroom Powder, it might sound weird, but I would highly recommend checking it out. And they've even given our listeners a 12% discount as part of our partnership. And you can get that with the code TALKINGWILD at wildfoods.co. There's this guy, Wim Hof, who's got this whole method. It's called the Iceman, and I just think his stuff is like really fun. But you know, there's a lot of studies actually showing the benefits of like being out in the cold, like just like how working out stresses your body a little bit, but it's actually good for you. So are, studies showing things like actually oxygen deprivation, where you're holding your breath, or like, training at a high altitude where there's less oxygen, or, putting yourself in a situation where it's really cold, freezing temperatures actually encourages the growth of like brown tissue in your body, which is like good and like makes you more resilient. There's actually like a ton of benefits to getting uncomfortable and putting yourself out. And so one thing that I thought was super interesting, we talked about just like for a second earlier, but was this idea that like people in Sweden and Scandinavia in general just kind of like let their babies sleep outside. We'll put the baby in the stroller and just kind of bundled up, but just let them sleep outside on the porch, which I thought was like so interesting. And you point out there's studies even showing like that then afterwards they're like more alert, they're more engaged, they have a bigger appetite, that the sleeping outside actually is good. And it made me really think about all this Wim Hof stuff, and how we kind of, he recommends like taking cold showers and ice baths and stuff like that, just to like get back in touch with this, because it's harder to even do some places. If you live in LA, it's like that cold doesn't even exist. But so reading this book just like got me really thinking about how it's interesting how that is part of the culture there, and it's not as much here. And if you have a teenager, you're not maybe going to be leaving them outside to nap, but like how you can get them out into the elements a little bit, or just start to kind of push them into like uncomfortable climates a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. So that's, the title of the book. I just have to come back to that because that's what this is all about. It's actually an old Swedish saying. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. So that's what the title comes from. And if you have grown up in Sweden or anywhere in Scandinavia, if you've heard it once, you've heard it a million times, because that's what all the adults just tell the kids when they whine about not wanting to go outside when it's rainy or snowy or whatever, uncomfortable weather. It's just an attitude that we have, that the weather doesn't matter. We know winters are going to be long and dark, and the weather is going to suck a lot of days in the winter, but the health benefits are so great from going outside that we're not going to let that stop us. You just kind of have to get over that. And so that's why a lot of parents try to foster this sort of early on, get the kids used to being outside in inclement weather so that they work up this sort of resilience, or they don't think twice about it. It becomes part of their just sort of normal routine. And then it's like, okay, it's raining. Okay, well, we'll just dress for the weather. So that's kind of the other part of this is you got to dress for the weather. Of course, the easiest way to do this is to do it from when they're little, so that they're used
Yeah,
to
start
it.
them
Like,
napping out there before they
yeah,
even
yeah,
know what's
yeah.
going on.
I rarely get that like my kids like rarely say anything about the weather anymore. They're 8 and 11 now, and they never question or say like, well, it's raining outside, because they know, well, we go outside regardless, because that's what we've always done. We've gone outside every day since they were little, because that's what we do. But if you have older kids and you feel like they're too sedentary and they need to get outside more, and I mean, it's never too late to start. I think it takes a little more effort on the part of the parent when the kids are older. It will probably require you to get out there with them initially, and
Yeah.
that's the same for very little children. Of course, you can't just like let a toddler outside on their own. They need some supervising. So there's a few years there where they need watching a little bit, but then. Of course, the goal is for them to play independently outside, assuming that you're in an area where it's safe to do so, which is, I think a lot of places. And as they get older, once they get into electronic devices and things like that, then it starts to get a little harder again. Because normally, younger kids, they really gravitate towards outside play. They love being out there and being allowed to jump in puddles and get dirty and climb trees. I mean, as long as us adults sort of step back and actually let them play in an unstructured way, kids love outdoor play. But once they get a little older and they start, like I said, they get their first tablet, or it's just a lot easier for them to stay on the couch, and us, it's the same for us adults. Of course, we I think we're wired to choose the path of least resistance, right? So of course it's easier to stay
We
inside.
seek comfort. Yeah.
Yes, so it takes a lot of drive from the parents to get the kids outside. It still does for me on some days, even though they don't protest about the weather. My kids don't always want to go outside, but so I have to push it. And it's to me, it's the same as just like I've pushed them to eat their vegetables and to, brush their teeth at night. And I know that doesn't sound very sexy. Like, it's just one of those things we have to do. But that doesn't mean they don't have a good time once they are out there. It's just getting them out the door is usually the hardest part.
So okay, the first thing I hear you saying is like is getting them the right clothes, making sure they have the right clothes for whatever the weather is outside, and then making the effort yourself, modeling it yourself, and then making the effort. So I'm wondering what that looks like in terms of just like saying, hey, we're gonna go for a hike today, or like just say, or what have you found as your kids are getting a little older is kind of the strategy for getting them out on those days when they don't do it on their own?
Right. So I have a few different things, and it kind of depends on time and what other activities they have. So, and also the time of the year, because during the winter it gets dark really early here. It gets dark. It's dark by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So not only do you need the right clothes, you also need headlights and reflective vests. Yeah, so you need some equipment, but it can be done. And they actually really love being outside in the dark. So, for example, on a school day, say a Monday afternoon, they come home and, maybe we'll eat some food, and then we go outside, and it could be as simple as just going for a little walk around our neighborhood, and we have headlights, and they want to play hide and seek, or we play flashlight tag. So we have like simple little games like that. And we're not outside for hours on end during weekdays because there's just not enough time. I mean, they also have homework, and some other days they have other activities too. But to me, it's important to just have that, even if it's just half an hour, to at least have that half an hour to go outside and do some games and, just have some together time outside.
And
And
start
then on
making it a
the
habit.
Yes, creating a habit is really key. Then on the weekends, when we have a little more time, we try to do some bigger activities, and maybe we'll drive to a nature area a little farther from our home, and maybe we'll just do something simple like packing a picnic. They love, just packing some sandwiches and hot chocolate when the weather is cooler. And often we'll bring a special treat as well, just to make it a little special. And just go for a little hike. Maybe we do some things along the way as well. It just depends. We listen for birds, or we talk about what the animals do in the winter, and just things like that, and just connecting. Usually I don't have a lot of things planned in advance. I try to keep it simple. But then when we do know in advance that we're going to have a full day, what we've been doing this year is something called Screen-Free Sundays. It started kind of as an experiment to see, because I was frustrated with how much time the kids spent on their devices. It's getting really hard now with my 11-year-old. She's got her own smartphone, and all her friends have smartphones, and they're starting to get into the social media and Snapchat, and think she just got Snapchat. She was the last one in her class to get it. Her classmates had had it for a while. And so eventually I just had to I caved, and I was like, okay, but it's going to be regulated, it's going to be monitored, and we still need to have plenty of outdoor time. So that was kind of the compromise. And so we have screen-free Sundays, and that's when I too try to go screen-free. And frankly, I think us adults need it as well. I think it's been almost as hard, if not harder, for me to stay off my phone. Because I have so much work connected to my phone. It's been pretty hard to do that, but I think it's really healthy. And to kind of get them to buy into this, because it was not easy.
We are here with Linda McGurk, talking about tips from her book, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather. And we're not done yet. Here's a look at what's coming up in the rest of the show.
Basically, at first they were like, no, that's no fun. And the first couple of Sundays, my youngest daughter it was more or less a disaster. We're just projecting our own anxiety on these kids who kind of get robbed of part of their childhood. And Peter Gray, it's interesting you brought him up, actually, because he also has this theory. When us parents, when we constantly supervise and direct kids' play and tell them what to do and what not to do, and tell them to get down from there, and you're going to get hurt, and all this, then the kids start to feel out of control. Like they when they're not in control of their own play, then that can lead to anxiety and even depression later on. That's how it is for adults too. Like when we're feeling out of control, that's like a main factor behind anxiety. And so that's another reason why it's so important to let kids have a sense of direction, and let them negotiate their own games. Don't always be in there and structure things for them. Let them let them play on their own and learn how to negotiate and do those things on their own.
Want to hear the full interview? Sign up for a subscription today. You get unlimited access to all the interviews I've conducted. It's completely affordable, and your subscription helps support the work we do here at Talking to Teens. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.